Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this one is against an extremely challenging opponent. All of them are extremely challenging, needless to say, but Runinja is back at it. So c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6. So this is a casual English defense. And then I borrow something different. I play the move e4. This move intends to completely control d5 and maybe push for d4 in the later future. But our friend Runinja can play bishop to c5, right? And he can play knight to c6 and try to really make that a weakness. But our friend instead played c6. Now, I'm not saying that c6 is a bad move. I'm just saying that whenever I make a concession or I make the move so that, I can no longer guard this square or anything, it's important to recognize those things and recognize that this might be important. Maybe sticking the knight on there is important, right? But c6 happens and also goes for d5, so I like that too. Knight f3, and now d6. And I would say now is the moment where I need to go for something, right? So I go for d4. And now I'm feeling kind of comfortable because after pawn takes, which I probably don't recommend pawn takes, I would recommend the move queen to c7. And the reason is because if pawn takes and now queen takes d4, now all of a sudden bishop to f4, castling queenside, and we got some pressure on the d file, right? Maybe Runinja's not ready for that. So what I would suggest is either queen to c7 or knight to d7. I know it doesn't look great, but at least it's something, right? You don't want to try to weaken your own structure because after pawn takes, which happened in the game, queen takes, and then c5 came. When I saw this move, I was very happy with my position, and I didn't quite like this move. I'm going to point out for a few reasons. Now, the first reason is because, well, my knight gets to come to d5 now. Number two, this pawn looks really, really bad now, because if I move queen to d3, and what I should have done here is I should have played bishop to f4, castled queenside, and just taken on d6. What I did instead was I played bishop g5, thinking I would castle, I would take on f6. So let me illustrate it. Castles, castle queenside, and after knight c6, I had in mind that I would take, and queen takes. But what I forgot about is that black can move the queen away, right? Our friend Runinja does not have to trade, and that's what I missed in my calculations. So then I was like, oh no. So I played a3 to prevent knight to b4. But our friend Runinja found another great move, knight to g4. I take on e7, and I play queen to d2, because I need to save my f2 pawn. Rook to d8, this is still a good weakness to take advantage of. I play knight to d5. I get on that d5 square that was once occupied by a pawn on c6, but now the pawn is on c5, and I'm very happy to get this guy on d5. And here's what I calculated. I calculated that if queen takes pawn, I'm going to play bishop to d3. And now, there is no way out of it, because after queen e8, knight to c7, and I get my hands on a fork, which I like. I like free pieces. So that's why. Queen to f8, good move, right? h3, and now I think about trading. But do I think it's a good trade for me? No, not at all. And the reason why it's not so good of a trade, and I knew this instantly, I said if I trade the knights, the pawn is going to take, the rook is going to open up, and it's not going to be so great for me, right? So if I trade, I'm doing our friend Runinja a favor. So I play queen to c3. I say, okay, if you want to trade with me, fair. I'll take with the pawn, I'll bring my rook out, and I'll aim it towards your g7 pawn. b6. Now this is an interesting way to get the pawn, maybe get the bishop out, right? I play knight to e1, and our friend Runinja plays knight to d4. I think this is really good play from Runinja, showing that these squares are important. He's taking advantage of them. f4, knight to c6, and now I play b4. But this does run into some problems because if our friend found f5 and weakened the pawn structure here, I would have been in a pretty bad shape, right? Because if f5, if pawn takes, and bishop takes, my king isn't looking so hot. Maybe I can play king to b2, but rook to e8. And if knight to c7, you might say, well, I mean, our friend Runinja can't even give up one of these rooks. I mean, maybe a5, right? Maybe even rook to e2 if I'm being bold. But what I'm saying is that my king can be attacked pretty easily, right? So for example, let's just say these knights stuck here, right? So these knights are occupying these squares, and my king doesn't feel very good, you know? That feeling when the troops are all around you and you're just like, what? Right? So you don't want to feel that discomfort. So right now, all these pieces are around your king. You don't want to feel that all the time. So that's why if f5 was played, I would have been really sad for myself. But bishop b7 happened, and I would say that this is not the best diagonal to develop the bishop, right? Every time I like to say that you want to bring out your pieces with something in mind. You want to be like, yes, I'm bringing it here, and then I'm going to maybe take on d5 one day. Or I'm going to bring it here and try to get something going on the c file, right? Maybe something like that. But here, bishop b7, I don't see much yet. So I play king to b2. I start improving. And now I play g4. Because here I finally say, you know what? I really got to stop f5 once and for all. Knight to e7. And at this point, I had already determined in my mind. I was like, yep, I'm going to do it. Nobody's going to tell me no. So I take on d4. And this is an exchange sacrifice. You might be like, why the heck are you playing around with your rooks, National Master Kevin Yang? And I'm telling you, I have to play around with them sometimes, you know? Pawn takes, queen takes, and at first it looks like a pretty decent position, right? My pawns, they're forming a good wall around me. I get my bishop out, I get my knight out. It looks pleasing. So knight to c6, queen to d2, rook to e8, my bishop comes out. And in these kind of situations, what you want to do when you see your opponent with such good position of the pawns is you want to try to make something happen. And here, that moment of breaking through now lets me see why this bishop came on b7. It's the target e4. How do you do that exactly with the knight in the way? You first start with the move b5, and you say pawn takes b5, I'm going to bring my knight to e7. If you take, I'm going to take with the queen, and the pawn on e4 is falling fast. Knight to c3, I'm going to play d5, and I'm going to try to blow things open. That's the goal you want to do when you're dealing with a set of good-looking pawns, right? I've got really good-looking pawns. But if you blow them open with the move b5, and then you blow them open with d5, along with this threat, it's looking pretty hot for black right now, right? So the momentum would shift if our friend Runinja had found b5. It's a very tough move to find, though, because you have to first see, okay, how do I break through, right? How do I get some play going, right? And it all is about having an active mind, right? You don't want to just sit your queen there on the corner. You want to do something. And this knight is extremely annoying. So you might want to break it, right? You want to break its foundation. So this really comes from the understanding that, okay, well, maybe white is going to play this one day, so I got to break it before white gets to it. But after g6, oh, I get a fork, I get a rook. I was also thinking about the move g5, h4, h5, take on g6, and get that rook to h7. So for example, I said queen to c3, rook to e6, h4, queen g7, g5, and I was thinking like this, because I thought rook here, h5, take, and rook takes, and I would have been really satisfied, right? But on the other hand, I saw the move h5, and I was like, what do I do from here? Right? I was like, oh, I don't know what to do from here. Maybe I could play f5, but then there's like rook to e5. There's knight to e5 later on. So I went with taking the rook, knight over, queen blocks, and I grinded out this endgame. Rook to e1. I thought this move f5 was really clever with the diagonal. Rook to e1, and after take, knight d8. That is an interesting strategy. Bring the knight to a better square, but I bring my knight there. And eventually, I get my king to d4. And this is the moment where I want to stop for now, because in the next video, I'm going to show you how I eventually grinded down Runinja, just one pawn up. So thank you, I'll see you soon.